Good day, everybody. In today's coverage, we study Stellar's native token XLM, which looks like it could be gearing up for a move towards $2 to $4. Nothing that I say is financial advice. Let's dive into the content. So how I've actually managed to get that sort of $2 to $4 range is simply by adding a fib on from this cycle's low of 0.07 in January of 2023 and simply retracing back to the prior cycle high of May 2021, which sits at a roughly 80 cents. Now, if XLM can come up and reclaim this May 2021 high, I think pushing back at least to the all-time high would be imminent, and entering price discovery, the 1272 to the 1618 would be the bull run targets I would like to look for to see XLM actually push to potentially top out this cycle. Now, the reason that I actually have these targets is simply by looking at a previous sort of foundational base for XLM, going back to sort of 2014 all the way up until 2017, which led to this massive euphoric run up to the current all-time high of January 2018, which sits roughly at about 93 cents. Now, it's evident that you can see here XLM had some very strong levels of resistance between its 0382 and 0618, which was roughly around 0.004 back then. Now, when XLM actually cleared out of this golden ratio resistance, you can see it never looked back. And once it did take out its one fib, it did push on to meet all of the 1272, the 1414, and the 1618 fib extension. So you can see here that over that sort of space, I think it only took a couple of months. Once it really started to kick into gear from March all the way up until sort of May. So over the space of a couple of months, it had a really euphoric move up to the 1618 fib extension before initially cooling off, pulling back to a key level of support and then extending further. But what I really wanted to focus on was this sort of cluster of price action, because we had a really sort of strong level of resistance that needed to be broken, and once it was, and that local high was taken out back then in sort of from December 2014, when that was taken out in May 2017, XLM did push to meet all of its 1272, 1414, and 1618 fib extensions. So simply based off prior data, I think what could be going on here is if XLM can continue to hold above a key level of support, i.e. this sort of support block here, which sits between 31 to 17 cents, then I honestly think that what's happening here is we're gearing up for another move which could push up to these 1272 to 1618 targets for this cycle, especially if XLM can come up and reclaim 80 cents in the next coming months. I do think that these are the potential bull run targets and where we could potentially see XLM top out. Now, how could we get up to this sort of price tag? How could we get up to those, $3 to $4 targets that we're looking at? Well, if we specifically actually look at this structure of price action here, okay, and we look at a very sort of similar time period for XLM in this previous price action, what you'll notice is XLM topped out locally in May 2017 before correcting a few months until October and then continuing its bullish structure. If you look at the current price action from sort of 2024 for XLM, where it initially topped out in November, what you'll notice is we've actually had a rally in July, but August, September, and coming into October have been quite corrective. So there's some similarities here in price action, and I think that what we have here is a potential replica, okay, of this actual move, which could lead XLM into this potential euphoria. If we was to get a bars pattern on, for example, where we've had this corrective phase, if the next few months for XLM are to be really explosive and we do sort of break out from this support, you can see again it pushes you up higher, in fact, but you would see this impulsive euphoric move towards $4 and beyond. So it looks like potentially what XLM is doing is rinse repeating a similar price action structure where it corrected from May until sort of October, and the month of October actually marked the local bottom after such an impulsive move, you could look at this as a potential bull flag, in all honesty. I think if you add, this sort of channel of resistance and support here, you could technically say that this was a flag and that this was a sort of flag pole. And if we get the target of that flag pole, initially just clone this trend line, and we drag it up, you'll pretty much notice that XLM actually ran up to that target. So this looks to be a massive potential bull flag, or was a bull flag, not a potential, because it did actually break out, and that target was met. So if we go off the same sort of analogy right now, if XLM is potentially in this bull flag where it's corrected for the last few months, okay, from sort of January, and it came all the way back down until sort of July before actually trying to push up again. But I think what we actually have here is this potential bull flag once again. And if we copy this flagpole and where we actually got the breakout, you will see that it brings XLM up towards sort of $2.30. Again, so that $2 to $4 range, if XLM is repeating a prior sort of structure to what it did in 2017, where we actually bottomed out. It bottomed out in September, but the month of October is where it really started to kick into gear back then. So is XLM rinse repeating now, waiting for that October candle to come in to really start getting impulsive and actually taking out its prior all-time highs? Now, there is also really bullish structure here. We have this major resistance block, okay, which you can see since sort of 2018, 2017 has been the major roadblock for XLM to actually break out of. And them sort of candle closes, I think the highest candle closes is roughly about 53 cents. So if we start seeing candle closes above 53 cents, I think this is where it gets really exciting. But if we look back again at previous data, you'll notice that XLM had another sort of previous resistance block where it ran up in March 2017, corrected a little bit, and then continued to actually euphorically break out. But once it did break through this previous resistance block, that's when it never looked back. So I think ultimately, if we do see XLM over the next sort of couple of months, if it does come up and break through this resistance block, I think this gives us the extra sort of go-ahead to confirm that we're going to start pushing up to those $2 to $4 targets. I mean, ultimately, if we was to rinse repeat a very sort of similar move to back then, which includes the bull flag structure, you'll notice if we actually get this into some sort of similar sort of outlying structure for XLM today, you'll notice that this again has the potential to push us up towards sort of $3 to $4. So I do think that what's going on here is XLM is gearing up for a major breakout of this resistance, just like it had a major level of resistance in the past in 2017 before really kicking into gear. Now, this structure, or this sort of consolidation phase, you could say at best for XLM, has been ongoing since the all-time high. And we've actually not broken this resistance for over 2,800 days. So once this resistance block does get cleared, I think that is the go-ahead for the euphoria. Now, we also have similar structure in regards to the ascending support. All the way from 2014, fast forward to 2017, we had this higher low structure under the resistance. Right now, we have a very similar. Again, this is just simple support and resistance, guys, okay? But since the local lows of, I think it was 2020, you can see that we've also been building this higher low structure. So we are in a very similar structural pattern to what happened when the initial breakout occurred in 2017, except we've been in a longer duration of sort of sideways consolidation / accumulation action, where we're building this higher low structure, waiting for the break of this resistance. So I think if we do initially get that break, that's where things get really euphoric. Now, you could also see this structure as a sort of symmetrical triangle, which has already had a very healthy backtest. So for example, if we go from these cycle lows and we've got this sort of higher low structure that we're building up here, you can see that we've been compressing in this triangle for several years. Now, what actually occurred is XLM got the breakout, I think it was in November and December of 2024. So you can see again, you're caught between support, resistance, support, eventually ran up to resistance, broke the resistance, had a healthy backtest to the previous triangle resistance, and is now looking for continuation of the trend. So ultimately what I'm saying here is we had a breakout in November, which took out the descending resistance. We then had this corrective bull flag sort of structure, bringing us back down for a flipped SR on the previous resistance line. And now we're looking for that continuation higher. So this is, in fact, I still believe very bullish structure. And the last sort of corrective phase for XLM, which lasted from sort of January into July, was essentially very similar to what XLM did back in the past over here, okay? And again, resorting back to time frames, if we look at the time frames once again and actually get this wick high as support back on, you will see here as well, the XLM, once it did break out, it retested this support block and then continued higher. So I think at the moment, what we're actually looking at is potentially a rinse repeat, where XLM's had this major breakout in November 2024, coming into 2025, corrected for 5 to 6 months into sort of August. We had a little bit of a breakout, and now it's a bit of chop. And I think that what this is going to lead into is that euphoric run, so to speak. And you could even look at this previous level of resistance here as another sort of symmetrical triangle where you had these lower highs compressing and you had these higher lows. And when XLM did break out and tackle through its major resistance block, that's when it never looked back. So I think if we do start to see those sort of candle closes for XLM above this resistance block, our current resistance block, which we've been under for 2,800 days, that's when things get really euphoric and them sort of $3 to $4 targets could be coming into fruition. Now, there is a couple of key support lines that I would like to see XLM hold here. And one is simply the monthly 20 and the monthly 55 EMA. So as long as XLM is above 20 cents, I have no concerns whatsoever. Because all we've done is we've had a major breakout, we've corrected to the 20, and now we're looking for continuation. If we don't get that continuation and we start heading into Q4 and it's a little bit rocky, just simply look for a rollover back to one of these two EMAs, and that would be my confirmational signal of the low actually being placed. So, you know, Q4 I think is going to be a very exciting time period for the overall market. And if XLM can sort of come up and mark a low over the next sort of month or so heading into Q4, you know, if October isn't too bright for Bitcoin, for example, you know, everyone's expecting the October. If it's the opposite and we do correct, simply look for these two EMAs. As long as XLM is above 25 and sort of 20 to 25 cents, I have no concerns. And it's pretty evident at the moment that we also have this sort of descending resistance that's on our heads. So if you do see XLM come up and actually take this descending resistance out, simply look for pushing at least back to the all-time high and filling this wick in of January 2018. So my honest thoughts, guys, as long as XLM is above its key moving average on the monthly key moving averages on the monthly time frame, I honestly think that the run towards sort of $3 to $4 is very, very likely. Now, some would say that's, you know, a little too conservative. I think until we get there, it's not. But at the end of the day, if you actually wanted to look at another sort of fib extension and where XLM could potentially go, these are much more euphoric targets, okay? But if we actually go from the cycle low of March 2020 and back towards the actual all-time high, okay, which is really and truly where XLM is trying to get to. Since March 2020, it's been building up this sort of higher low structure, trying to push back up to the all-time high, which currently sits roughly at about 93, 94 cents. So in theory, if we have a fib from the March 2020 low going back to the all-time high, the targets again still sit between $2 to $4 on the 1272 to 1414. But if things get really explosive, there's also the 1618 at $8.70. But again, I would like to see our original this cycle low of 2023 retracing to the 2021 cycle high, initially broken first, and our targets at sort of $1.50 to near $4 met before that potential $8 extension on the previous fib that I just had on. So there is other extensive targets, okay, towards sort of $8 if we do push through $4, especially considering, you know, I think the potential is there because this has been a 2,800 day resistance block for XLM to break through with continuous higher low structure over the last few years. So at the moment, I think it's just simply waiting to place new local candle highs and to actually start taking out this resistance block. And if XLM does do that, as I said, you can see here that at the moment it had a major breakout in November, December, ran into resistance, had this corrective bull flag structure towards it 20 and 55 EMAs, and right now it's gone for another attempt, okay? But so far, as I said, things look a bit choppy. So if we do come back here any further, simply look for sort of 25 to 20 cents and then building up that rocket ship to actually explode potentially into sort of Q1 2026. So I think it's all about actually marking this low in the next month or two. And if XLM has already potentially placed it on this 20-month EMA, and it does really start kicking into gear in October, then this is where we could see further extensive targets towards $8 if we do push over into Q1 and the breakout comes sooner than actually waiting until a little bit more in Q4. So at the moment, key things to take away: if XLM does start placing higher candle closes above sort of 55 cents in the next few months, and you see this resistance block taken out, that's 2,800 days of pretty much consolidation in either a symmetrical triangle or an ascending triangle, where we have this ascending level of support, a horizontal level of resistance. If that gets broken, price discovery will be euphoric. I hope you've enjoyed the content from Chart Nerd TA. Take care. Peace out.